Well, good evening and welcome to St. Andrew Lutheran Church this Thursday evening. Thank you for those who have braved the little snowfall this evening and have joined us here in the sanctuary. And also those who are joining us online as well. What a great option on a snowy evening for those of you who are staying close to home or elsewhere around the country. Actually, there are others who are in Florida and California and so forth who are joining us as well. We're here tonight to learn about the care of refugees through Arrive Ministries, and Kelsey Manfred is here from Arrive Ministries, and we'll share their introductory presentation in a few moments as we begin thinking and wondering and praying about how we might, as faithful people, engage with these newest neighbors in our community as they make their way from somewhere around the world. A few words of introduction. You've gotten to know me over the course of my time here at St. Andrew and know that I was in Cairo, Egypt before serving here at St. Andrew here for over eight years now. But one of my roles in Cairo was to work with refugees who were in the in-between stage. Refugees in and around Ethiopia, refugees from South Sudan, refugees from Iraq that were displaced because of the Iraqi war, and the programs at St. Andrew's United Church of Cairo and St. Andrew's Refugee Services were working with refugees in that intermediate or medium stage. They've left their first country and haven't yet found resettlement, and we'll learn tonight how few actually find resettlement into our care and into the care of Arrive Ministries. But I think I also want to mention, too, that the backdrop, the kind of holy irony that we experience here tonight is the war that's happening in Ukraine this very day that is causing internally displaced people, that they will become refugees when they leave their country of origin and will undoubtedly find themselves in very challenging straits in and around Ukraine. And so here we are to care for people with that backdrop. So thank you for joining us here as we think about what that means and conflicts mean to people. I want to thank Pax Christi, also the Catholic community here in Eden Prairie, especially Joan Howe-Polis, and also one of their members, Craig Pixley. They have been engaged also with Arrive Ministry and with Kelsey too in setting up a couple of good neighbor teams, and they've been good conversation partners with me as I've learned a little bit more about Arrive Ministries and how they've appreciated Arrive, and so it's great to have Kelsey here to be here. One of the things that I want you to pick up on here too in our conversation here is what I appreciate about Arrive Ministries' philosophy of sustainability, of empowerment, and of mutual transformation through relationships that we could have with a refugee family, but a kind of empowering, sustainable relationship that helps the refugee families engage in their new climate in a thoughtful way, in an intentional way, their new home in an intentional way, and how they train us to think carefully about how that works. And so it is something that I've appreciated about the paperwork and the materials and a lot of what work is all about, to accompany people, to walk beside people, to teach rather than do, to equip rather than just take care of the issues. You know what I mean? When we're looking to empower people into a sustainable life. And so ultimately we're following God, and I think in our calling to welcome strangers, to address the most needy in our culture, and to realize the integrity and identity of all people as God's children, as especially they're dealing with circumstances of a resettlement process that is far from simple. So a couple things that are my goals here for this evening. Number one, I have a microphone here, a stick mic, that if you have any questions here in the audience, I'll give you the microphone so that you can speak into the microphone, and that way the people at home can hear everything that you say. So if you have any questions, I'll keep an eye out, so I'll come to you with that. There's also a phone number at the bottom of the screen as well that Jack will put up. So if people at home want to text in a question, I have the app on my phone, so I'll be able to see that question, and I'll just interrupt carefully and nicely Kelsey, and she can address questions that are coming in from you at home here as well. At the conclusion of our session here this evening, I have some information, or Kelsey brought some information from Arrive Ministries if you want to take a pamphlet or a business card and so forth in the back. There are also 2 clipboards. If you're interested in being part of a Good Neighbor team that can partner with a refugee family, one family visiting them 3 to 4 times a month for a whole year, you'll hear more about that in the presentation. I'd love your name and your contact information so I can put you on another list, so I can be in touch with you about how the process is going. There's also a homework help program here in Eden Prairie for a few Somali families, a little different kind of commitment for sure, but there's also a way to check that box on the form back there to let me know if you're interested in that program, or both programs would be just fine. For those of you who are online, I would welcome an email to my church email address. Jack can also put that up on the screen here as well. We'll put it up as the presentation ends. If you send me an email, I'll put you on that list. But if you're at home, you obviously can't sign the list, but send me an email, let me know who you are, and I'll make sure you get on that list as we move things forward. So as we turn the podium here over to Kelsey in a moment, I'd like to offer a prayer. Let us pray as we gather together. Gracious God, we give thanks for an opportunity here to explore your world, the world that you love, the world that you bless through so many ways, especially through Jesus, your Son. And we give thanks for the opportunity that we have to think about and wonder about how we might exercise our faith by caring for new members of our community. No matter where they come from, we are all your children, and we all need care and support and love. So help us discern, understand, and know where our place is, and we know that we will follow you in the ways that you call us. So bless us this night. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Kelsey Manfred, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Manfred. I am the Good Neighbor Program Director at Arrive Ministries. We are one of 5 resettlement agencies in Minnesota. The others are Lutheran Social Services, the Minnesota Council of Churches, Catholic Charities, and the International Institute. I think I'm missing one. So what we do is we do refugee resettlement, and that's a big, overwhelming field of work, but we simplify it so that churches can get involved. So I'm here today to tell you more about that, tell you more about Arrive, about refugees in general, their journey to Minnesota, and how you guys can get involved. So I have a video we can start with.
Does love have an open door? Welcome, stranger. Give us your tired and poor. All those in need. Come every weary soul. Find your haven, liberty is for all who can breathe free. Oh, what a beautiful world, what a beautiful world. Oh, what a beautiful world, what a beautiful world.
Welcome to America.
Does love have an open door? Welcome, stranger. Does love have an open door? All those in need. Oh, what a beautiful world. Oh, what a beautiful world. Oh, what a beautiful world, what a beautiful world.
So a lot of what we do is we welcome people. It's not just we do refugee resettlement. These are people, they're miracles that arrive at our door after we get into how people get here and the process and the paperwork to even be resettled and the length of time it takes. It'll make more sense, but it is amazing to have just a video that sort of demonstrates how the church is opening their doors, their homes. People are welcoming refugees, and that is amazing, especially considering just some of the political things that have happened in the past couple of terms and how refugee resettlement had fallen to such low numbers, and now we have a significant amount of people coming. It gives us a great opportunity to welcome people with the love of Christ. Okay, so we exist for life transformation for refugees, immigrants, and the church. This is our driving mission, our vision. This is what we want. We don't just want refugees to do well here. We want that to happen, but we want it to be a transformational relationship between the church and immigrants and refugees. And we do that by encouraging the church to love refugees and immigrants practically, socially, and spiritually. We call this our holistic model of ministry. Every person needs to be developed and loved and empowered in a holistic manner. If you only help with practical things, you forget that they need friendship or that they have spiritual lives as well. So we try to go through this with them as a church, as church, capital C, the big church, to encourage people as they start new lives here. And then you find that you end up being transformed in these ways as well as you build relationships with people. So one way that we do this practically is we provide direct program services, which means that we have a cooperative agreement with the government to provide case management. This can be a minimum of 30 days and a maximum of 90 days, and we have a bunch of requirements that we need to fulfill legally for practical things. And some of those things volunteers can help with, some of them we do as a staff, but there are a variety of direct program services that we have to provide. Secondly, we mobilize the church. This fills that social part of that holistic ministry model. We do that primarily by forming good neighbor teams. So right now I have 59 good neighbor teams throughout the metro area, which that means there's 59 churches or so that have said, hey, we want to have a team of people that want to welcome one family for 1 year. And they get to come around a family, encourage and support them and empower them to figure out how to do life here, but also to just build friendship with them, welcome them into your home, have a meal together. There's a variety of ways that you can connect with a refugee family. It's really not that different than connecting with a new neighbor on your block that you haven't met, that moved from somewhere else. We have about 20 people on staff. So another reason we mobilize the church is because we just don't have the capacity to care for the number of people coming through. Today we were crunching some numbers, and since October, we have matched 214 refugees with volunteers. So that is a large number of refugees that have arrived in the past few months, and there's no way that as a staff we could care for them and love them and show up for them in a consistent way, and that is where the church comes in. You guys would have a chance to do that for one family. And this is part of our spiritual call to respond to the situation of refugees in a biblical manner. The Bible is full of scripture about welcoming the foreigner, the stranger, the sojourner, and we are trying to encourage the church in the Twin Cities to do that. We also offer a variety of trainings throughout the time that you would be a good neighbor. We do a training before you're matched with a family. We do a training kind of midway through. And we also do other trainings. We had considerably more trainings before COVID, but we are working on rebuilding some of our training programs for our volunteers. So we're hoping that more of those will happen in the next year. Like I was saying, so in Leviticus 19:33 through 34, it says, "When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." And then Matthew 25:35, "I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." It's the words of Jesus. Working with refugees is a unique opportunity to be the hands and feet of Christ, to people. And sometimes we don't realize they're right here in the cities area, or we don't know what their story might be. So when we engage with them, it's a way that we're transformed. Our perspectives are transformed. How we understand God it grows. And yeah, it's just an amazing experience. So let's kind of get into the details. Does anybody want to take a stab at who refugees are, or the definition of a refugee?
Anyone who's displaced?
That's a good guess.
Displaced, yeah.
Someone who's displaced. Any other guesses? Okay. There's an actual legal definition. It is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So in order to be a refugee, you have to fit these criteria. There are lots of people that flee their countries due to economic hardship or even environmental changes, like a huge disaster. But in order to be a refugee, you have to fit this criteria. So all of the refugees coming through our office have a story with something going on in all of these areas of their life. So how many refugees are in the world? There's about 26.4 million refugees in the world. It's a really large number. There are 48 million internally displaced people. So I want to take a minute to explain the difference. An internally displaced person is someone who might fit that criteria of being a refugee, but they haven't yet left their country. So it would be like if something happened and we fit that criteria, but we just moved to Wisconsin. That would be an internally displaced person. That is happening in Ukraine today. We're seeing that happening. We've had a lot of phone calls come in today. We actually had a Ukrainian family of 9 that was supposed to come yesterday, but they had positive COVID tests, so they are going to have to wait, and we're not sure when or how we will reschedule their travel. So I know they were in the capital to go to the airport, and I know they have to go back home to their rural home that they sold. It's empty. They sold everything they were going to be leaving, which is a significant distance from the capital. And there were a lot of internally displaced people during the Syrian refugee crisis. You might remember some of that from the news back then. Another number on here, it says there's 4.1 million asylum seekers. The difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee is that a refugee goes to a second or third country, they register with UNHCR, and they start a paperwork process to become a refugee. Asylum seekers might have the ability to get on an airplane and come to the U.S. Maybe they have some money, they can buy a ticket, and then when they land, they say, I would like to apply for asylum. It is a similar process, but it's just you're going about it in different steps. So here, asylum seekers, typically it takes 3 to 5 years for the asylum process to go through legally. And during that time, asylum seekers are not allowed to work, so they have a lot more needs than a typical refugee coming through. Whereas a typical refugee coming through, they're allowed to work. They know that within a year they can apply for a green card, and within 5 years they can study and become citizens, take the citizenship exam. It's a little bit harder for asylum seekers. We have had churches take on asylum seeker families in the past, but that is usually churches that have a house available or a housing situation available, and then you get really creative about how to find sort of like some valuable things like work. Work is a valuable thing. And asylum seekers, if they're not allowed legally to work, then we work creatively to figure out how can we bring some purpose and meaning to their life while they're waiting for their status. Yeah. But this is a large number. So the refugee journey. Not every refugee has the same story, but the journey has similar steps. So we're going to go through those steps. The first step is called pre-flight chaos. We can use Afghanistan this summer as an example. We saw how quickly things got very chaotic, and then people basically made the decision like, this isn't safe, it's not stable, we need to get out of here. The second step is people flee. They decide, okay, it's really not safe, I need to get my family out of here, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna get on a boat, I'm gonna get on an airplane, I'm gonna walk, I'm gonna swim, just really any way to get out. And that is what they do, they flee. So you might remember this is also from the Syrian refugee crisis. I imagine some of us remember just the news about overloaded boats, and I can't imagine putting my 3 kids on a boat that just really has a lot of potential to sink before it gets to the other side. It just shows the level of desperation in these situations. They're making really hard decisions for their families. We have a significant number of Afghan families that we know of that are still moving every day in Kabul. So some of their family is here, some is still in Afghanistan, and they're moving every day, so they aren't found, basically. And I imagine there will be similar stories now coming out of Ukraine, just as people are trying to get away from war and terrible things. When people flee, they end up in a refugee camp. When they get to a camp, they can register with UNHCR. This is a photo of Kakama, which is one of the largest camps. When they get there and after they register, they're given some materials to make a roof on a house, and then they usually make it out of mud bricks that they make, and then they put the roof on. Living in a refugee camp is not exciting. Hopefully your basic needs are met. There's not really opportunities for employment or education. You really are just waiting. You're waiting for a solution to this problem. So there are 3 main ways to move forward as a refugee. One is repatriation, which means you've decided it's safe enough to go home. The second is integration, which is you basically integrate into whatever country you've fled to. This happens a lot in Kenya. Somalis will flee Somalia and they don't want to stay in the camp, so they go to Nairobi and they kind of live under the radar. It's really difficult to integrate into countries. We're finding that happening as we're accepting all of these Afghan evacuees. Most countries probably would have put them all in a camp and let them be refugees in a camp. We're trying to integrate them into society here while they figure out their legal situations. And it's not an easy process. Our systems aren't really designed to manage this level of a crisis. The third option is resettlement. And these are the people that we typically get to work with, the people who have gone through the process and are getting resettled to another country, which means they are saying, I no longer will be a citizen of my country. I'm going to move to a new country, and I will be on a path to be a citizen of a new country, which is really a scary and exciting process all at the same time. So what is the average time people wait before they're resettled? The average time is 17 years. It's a really long time. We had a Karen family scheduled to travel recently, and it said that the husband had fled in 1976. So they have been in a camp in Thailand for a very long time. I can't imagine what that would be like. I mean, you're in camp, like life doesn't stop, guys. Babies are born, you get married, people die, people grow up. There might be people who were born in a camp and don't leave until their early 20s to be resettled, and they don't know life outside of being in a refugee camp. It's just a really interesting experience. So this number is going to get you. What percentage of refugees are resettled? It's less than half of 1%. So people are waiting for 17 years, and then less than half of 1% get to come to be resettled. So all of the families that come through our office, we like to say are miracles, because there's really no way that they should be coming based on the numbers, and God is bringing them to us, bringing them through our office. He has provided churches and church teams who welcome them, and we just think that God has really given us some miracle families. This is a picture of meeting families at the airport. So how do refugees get resettled across the U.S.? People usually have a lot of questions about this. So when refugees register with UNHCR, then they go through a bunch of big organizations who decide who's going to go to which country and for what reasons. Often it's because maybe they have some family that was settled in a certain country before. And then what happens once they decide, oh, they're going to come to the U.S., the numbers go to World Relief. World Relief is our big umbrella organization. We're an affiliate of World Relief. And then they tell us who's coming. So that's how we know that they're coming. This is just a graph that shows the refugee ceilings since 1980. You can see that there was a big spike and then it kind of evened out. Typically in the past, we had received about 400 refugees a year. But in the past, during the Trump administration, the refugee ceiling dropped very, very low, the lowest it had ever been. And last year, there was only like 50 people that came through, which is a very low number. And like I'm saying, we already had 214 matches since October. And right now, our ceiling is set at 325 for our program year, but that doesn't include the 145 or so Afghan families that have already come through our office. So that's just a diagram to show you, how resettlement had grown and stabilized and then fell. So there was a lot of structural and organizational things that kind of broke down. So during this crisis, we've had to rebuild a lot of our processes and our organizations to be able to manage everything going on with this Afghan crisis. This is just another way to see it. So those were our numbers in 2015, 2016, close to 350, 400, and then it really tapered off. There are many organizations actually that closed. Catholic Charities in the cities closed. They still exist in Rochester and the southern parts of Minnesota, but they weren't able to sustain their staff during the last administration because they just didn't have refugees arriving. Yeah, you can just see it's a lot. It's a big jump. Okay, let's talk about the Afghan crisis a little bit. So the Afghans coming are not actually refugees, they're called evacuees. And the U.S. has welcomed more than 60,000, and they've been given the status humanitarian parolee, which is a specific legal status that is actually usually really, really difficult to get. It's for very dire situations, and they're usually really picky about it, but they decided to give all of these Afghans this humanitarian parolee status. We are providing similar services as refugee resettlement would, but they are not refugees. And then these families didn't do that 17-year wait process where they did a bunch of paperwork and vetting. All of that is happening at the forts very quickly, and people are coming through. So you can see this shows our cap is at like 325 for regular refugees, and then our Afghan parolees are that yellow line, which shows about 145, I think. Where else is Arrive receiving arrivals from? We've had Sudanese, Iranian, Syrian, Burmese, a bunch of Afghans, Ukrainians, Somalis, Guatemalans, Congolese, South Sudanese, and Iraqis, just in the past few months since September or so. So we have people coming from all over the place. I know the Afghan crisis is in the news more, but we have families coming from everywhere with stories from all over the world. 95% of the refugees that come to Minnesota are joining family or friends. So refugees do better if they join family. It's also helpful for us because hopefully that family's been here long enough to learn English so that they can help interpret for us. But people tend to do much better if they're joining family. We have had a significant number of free cases. We call them free cases if they don't have family in Minnesota, and it's much harder to help those families because they just don't have as much relationship or community or connection when they come. So what services do they receive when they arrive? We have a federal contract to provide services, which means that they have up to 90 days of case management. We legally cannot case manage them past that 90 days. And the goal of that case management is self-sufficiency. So we want them to be able to pay their rent, ride the bus, get to work, know how to call the doctor within 90 days, which is an amazing feat. And this is another reason that we have church teams, because I don't know about you, but I don't know that I could be self-sufficient in another country, in another language, in 90 days. Every refugee that comes gets a one-time grant of $1,000 a person. That grant money goes through Arrive, and the case manager usually helps to budget that money, and often most of it is used to pay rent for the first 3 months. And then once they're set up on county cash assistance and food support, then they help them budget out that money with some of this grant money to pay their rent a little bit longer until they can find work. Some of our core services include Social Security cards, enrolling in public benefits, like I was saying, the cash assistance and the SNAP or EBT. We connect them with a job counselor. We often help them set up a bank account, enroll the adults in ESL classes, get the kids enrolled in school, and we do a cultural orientation as well as many other services that kind of come into play. Every family that comes is different and has different challenges, so often some families need more medical help than others, and some families need more help with English school or something. So our core services kind of stay the same, but every family we try to meet them where they're at. Housing is always really challenging for us. Often people arrive with either 24 hours notice, or maybe we have like 4 weeks of notice. There's really not any available housing. So if anyone knows a landlord or has a property, we would really appreciate the consideration to have a refugee live in that property. We need referrals and connections. Often landlords are a little bit hesitant because refugees don't have anything on a background check, and they don't have any rental history, and they're coming and they're looking for employment, but they're not yet employed. So there is a risk, but most of our refugees coming are very responsible and very excited to have a life and be able to work and have opportunities for their children. We just need them to be safe, sanitary, affordable, and on a bus line because they can't drive when they come. These are some of our current needs for housing. We need a couple of 2 bedrooms, actually a considerable amount of 2 bedrooms for a couple of families and some 3 bedrooms. And then we have some larger families. We did find a house for the Afghan family that needed 5 bedrooms, but the Ukrainian family of 9 will come eventually. We just don't know when. So we need bigger houses for them. So there are a variety of ways that you guys can get involved with Arrive.
Across the world, the refugee crisis is not a small thing. Tens of millions of people are displaced across all corners of the globe as a result of war, of famine, of political unrest, and any number of reasons. It is a global problem. It is no small problem, and it is something that the church needs to be aware of and needs to take action on. We got started with Arrive Ministries about a year or a year and a half ago, and part of the reason for that was you would see a lot of imagery, a lot of stories within the news about the refugee situation. And in the midst of that, it just broke our heart for the situation that was going on throughout the world.
In talking to our small group, we all got to the same place where we realized we have to do something. We just can't sit back anymore. So we started researching different organizations, and when we found Arrive, we just instantly fell in love
Arrive Ministries is a Christian nonprofit organization who works to resettle and welcome refugee families into the Twin Cities and greater Minnesota area. And everything they do is focused on how do we equip the local church to be the hands and feet to the least of these, to be the ones who can step in and say, we're going to love you, we're going to welcome you, and we are going to show and model Jesus to you in the midst of this really difficult journey that you've been on. The family that we welcomed is originally from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and they spent the last 15 years of their life in a refugee camp in South Sudan. So the adult children of our host family spent much of their life growing up in a refugee camp in Sudan.
When Mike met them at the airport, he came home that night and said, "You are going to fall in love with this family." And it was so true. The second that I met them, I knew that these people are going to have a really huge impact on us and our family, and they already have.
When we go visit our refugee family, it could be any of a number of things that we would do when we go over there. Sometimes we need to talk to them about paying their rent or paying a utility bill. They need to figure out where to buy groceries and how to get a bank account. But other times we go over there and it's just hanging out. It might be cooking food, it might be helping them clean, it might just be sitting with them and trying to figure out how they're feeling, how their day is going.
In the United States, we're so often bombarded with things that are trying to make us feel comfortable, and there has been nothing in this process that has been comfortable or easy. And just the way that God has used that discomfort to stretch us, we just over and over again through reading and through studying have felt so secure and so confident that this is a mandate that God has on our lives, that this is not something that we could do or it might be a great idea, but that we need to do. And we feel so confident that it is exactly what God wants us to be doing.
We feel like as a couple and as a small group, we can get involved in a way that's manageable, it's tangible, and it does make a difference. We are making a difference with one family in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're not going to solve everything, but we can at least take a small little bite out of the big problem. And it's allowed us to take that internal angst that we had about, we need to do something to solve this is horrible, and actually make steps to doing something that is real and is tangible.
So one of the main ways, like that video was saying, is you can become a good neighbor team and be matched with one family. And we ask that you would meet that one family once a week for 1 year. And our good neighbor teams are usually 4 to 10 people. So you're not going to be the one single person going once a week for a year. You would have a team of people doing it together, to walk together to do it. I appreciate how they say, nothing about it is comfortable. It is uncomfortable. It is not unlike flying to another country and feeling like, I don't understand the language, and I don't know the food, and I'm nervous about this, and I don't know how to communicate. That all happens here, and it is uncomfortable, but if we go into it with the mindset of like, hey, this is how we love people, and this is what Christ would do if refugees were showing up in front of him on earth, and if we go as a team and encourage each other and pray through it, it becomes a really beautiful relationship. But with all good things, we have to kind of push through some of the challenges too. One challenge we're seeing a lot with volunteers recently is just kind of like the expectations of what it will look like, and then when they walk through the door of what we can find for safe and sanitary and affordable housing, and just realizing that it looks a lot different than maybe what we would expect it to look like. And it's really hard to see that level of poverty in our own city and realize, I didn't know, or I was unaware of this, or maybe I was aware of it, but I've never actually been present in it. So that's a challenge that we've been walking through with our volunteers. But if you form a Good Neighbor team, we have a staff of Good Neighbor coordinators, and every team is paired with a coordinator who is there to support you and encourage you and resource you. My coordinators this week have had a lot of long phone conversations with people just saying, you know, I know it's frustrating and I know the systems are overloaded, but you know, everyone will get to their health screenings. The appointments are really backed up, but it's going to happen. We just have to be patient, which is hard to see so closely the injustices of our systems and the situation, but we as a church get a chance to come around a family. Many of the other resettlement agencies don't have as many volunteers as we do. We have upwards of 700 volunteers that are encountering refugees through our organization. Other organizations do that 90 days of case management, and those families are on their own. So there are challenges, and it is stretching, but I think it is a space in which everyone can grow and learn together, and it becomes a really beautiful thing. This couple was matched with one family, and now they actually have a 15-passenger van. I don't know the whole story, but whenever I see them, they open up the doors of their van, and all of the Karen kids just keep coming out, and I don't know where they all came from, but now they know probably 10, 15, 20 families because they were matched with one family. So you get to see a whole new side of the city, get to know a whole new community that you never knew was part of the Twin Cities metro area, try some new food, learn a little bit of a new language, and support a family as they learn how to live here. I think it's really exciting. It's an adventure, and you don't even have to go anywhere. Another way you can get involved is you could be a host home. We have a list of host homes on call for if we do have an arrival coming in less than 24 hours, so that we can call someone and say, hey, can they stay with you? It's a lot cheaper than paying for a hotel out of that grant money that they're getting. So we like them to be close to the office because we do have to drive back and forth for appointments, and often we need space to host larger families. It's helpful if people have maybe one or two empty bedrooms at home with a spare bed that would be able to host a family for a couple of weeks. We have one single man from Sudan who's been here for a couple of months, and he's been in a host home the whole time, and they just decided, you know, housing's expensive, why doesn't he just stay for a little bit longer until he finds work? So often people stay longer than 2 weeks, but sometimes 2 weeks is a lot if it's like a family of 6. You're like, okay, it's time for you to get your own house. But that could be a really beautiful relationship that's formed too. A lot of our host homes stay in connection with the families they hosted and go to visit them and have helped with various things. So it's a wonderful way to welcome people. We have opportunities to help tutor or teach English through our SALT program, which is for Somali adults and Somali kids. A lot of that program in the recent years has been homework help for Somali families and the kids, especially during COVID as schooling became really challenging for people. There are 2 families in Eden Prairie that I know of. I think they're both women, like the moms of the family want to learn English. And there's one family in Shakopee. So if that's of interest to anyone, we have a couple of connections in this area. And then we do have a program for teaching Afghan women English, but right now Afghan women are a little bit more concerned about making sure they know how to feed their families and have housing. So in a few months, we imagine that program will start up again once they're more settled. But right now, they're just trying to kind of get on their feet. Yep, this is mostly through our SALT program. We provide homework help to school-age kids. And there is a list of people, but those opportunities I just mentioned are kind of the ones in this area. But if you're willing to drive a bit further, we often have opportunities in South Minneapolis or Minneapolis. We're always looking for volunteer interpreters also, so if for some reason you have a foreign language hiding in you that no one knows about, you could become an interpreter. These are a handful of the languages that we're always looking for to have on our list. And then we'll always take physical donations. I brought a half-page flyer in the back that has a list of all of the things that we are required to give a family when they arrive. So you can put together a kit for a family of 4. Or you can go onto our website and we have a registry. You can just ship it to our office. You don't have to drop it off or anything. That's also a great way to do donations. And then obviously you can just donate and be a financial partner as well. If that makes most sense for you, you can find the information for that on the website as well. We have a couple of open positions. If you're interested in working for Arrive, we're looking for an executive director, a director for our SALT program, and also a housing coordinator. And then this is just some next steps that you could do on the website. But tonight we're going to talk more about the Good Neighbor program, and the next steps will be the sign-up sheets through Pastor Peter or emailing him so that you can get involved. So a Good Neighbor team, like I was saying, is about 4 to 10 people, and it's one family once a week for 1 year. And usually we ask churches to kind of pray about it and join their team together. And then we need the team to have a team leader. So one person or 2 people need to step up and say, hey, I'm willing to kind of coordinate the team and be a point of contact for the coordinator at Arrive so that we can keep all of the information organized. So during case management, there are a lot of appointments. Often we ask teams to help with 5 appointments. So that might look like taking someone to Social Security. It's a pretty straightforward appointment. There's a paper application. You transport them there. You make sure that when they do the application that the Social Security person gives them basically a printout of what's going to be on their Social Security card. And you double check that their name is spelled right and that their birthday is correct, things like that. It's pretty straightforward. So that might be one appointment. Some of the other appointments might be taking them to get enrolled at ESL school. And the case manager would set up most of that, but we might call and say, would someone be willing to take them for this appointment? They're registered, but they need to take an English language assessment test, and it usually takes an hour or so. So that's another example of an appointment you might help with. Other ones might be just helping them set up a bank account, which you probably know how to do because you've done it yourself before, but they don't know how to do it because they've never lived here, so you just need to take all the proper documentation and help them get that set up. So there's a variety of different ways to provide practical help, particularly in those first 3 months. But as the year progresses, there's more and more time and space to maybe take the family to the zoo or have them over for dinner, go to a baseball game, just include them in your life, show them the city, and have just time to build friendship and relationship. And that's the goal that we have, is just that people would build friendship and that it would be mutual back and forth. Yeah, so that would be the next steps. Pray about it, decide if you want to do a team, let Pastor Peter know, pick a team leader, and then we could move forward with some of our training. We do an orientation training after the team is formed. That training goes through more practical ways to follow through with that holistic ministry model. So we use a book called Foreign to Familiar, which is, it's based on hot and cold cultures. So basically we'll go through our culture is very individualistic, but other cultures are more relational. And what does that look like? And how can you just notice what's going on with your culture and notice what's going on with someone else's culture and figure out ways to communicate and get to know each other. Be more aware of that. And we also go through some scripture and we pray and we encourage you. We give lots of examples, go through some different scenarios and how we can have wisdom and how we help people, because our goal is to empower people to be self-sustaining and have their own personal capacity. So we don't want to be helping so much that we're creating dependencies. But it's a fun time, and we get to know each other, and you get to know the coordinator that will be matched with you. And we want this holistic model to play out for our families. We also want that for our volunteers. So we're very supportive and encouraging of you as a team as you walk through the year with your family. And then at the end of the year, if you want to continue on in relationship with the family you're matched with, that's amazing. We just probably won't keep calling you because we'll have new families coming. And by then, you'll know what you're doing anyway. Yeah, so that's all I have for you tonight. Does anyone have any questions?
Maybe a little bit more information, Kelsey, about the homework help or the support of students in that way. That's, would be helpful what that routine looks like for
Yeah.
volunteers.
Yeah, so for the homework help programs, that one can be, it's difficult to answer only because each family is going to have different needs. So you might have, a family with students in high school that need help with their algebra homework. Or you might have a mom and dad that have been here for a long time and they want to study for citizenship. And you might just have like a handful of elementary school kids that really just need help like completing their homework. So that is kind of a case-by-case basis. So if there's someone in your area and you're interested in that, what we would do is we would call the family, learn a little bit more about what they're looking for, and then call you and find out, hey, are you comfortable doing this? If we resource you, is this, do you think this will be a good fit? And then it's kind of that same idea, once a week for a year would be the commitment unless something changes or the family doesn't need it anymore. I had matched one woman to tutor, this wonderful woman, and then she ended up getting pregnant with twins. And she said, I don't have time to go study for my GED right now. I'm not feeling very well. But they've kept up their relationship and their friendship, but she's not really tutoring anymore. But I think the whole goal is we want to build relationships and friendships. And tutoring is a great way to get into a home and meet a new family. And sometimes it's really structured, and other times it's more flexible. So.
So, like, what percentage of the families speak English, and what is the communication barrier like? Like, 'cause I'm sure there is sometimes a barrier or not, but how often is that a huge barrier? Like, especially with, like, homework help.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we deal with the language barrier and how many people speak English? So I will say not very many people speak English. We get some information and it will say, speaks English a little bit or none, can write in English, none. Usually they all say none. And we use a lot of Google Translate. Google Translate works great for Somali, Arabic, French, a lot of languages. You can just put the app on your phone, you can type it in, translate it. We always encourage people to translate it back and forth a few times between English and Arabic or whatnot, because sometimes it doesn't translate it properly. We have this funny story where we had gotten a text from a client that said something like, "You've sent the evil person to get me." And we were like, what does this mean? And then we called an interpreter to say, is this what they meant? And because we had translated it back and forth and it was incorrect. And she said, no, it just says, please send me my documents. So sometimes it's funny and we just have to laugh about it, but it is a challenge. If you're doing homework help with Somali families in particular, the Somali community has been here for a long time, it's pretty established. Most of the kids speak fluent English and wouldn't be able to speak fluent Somali. But often mom and dad might not know enough English to keep up with their studies, especially if they're in high school or college or something like that. So it's just that extra support for some of those things. Yeah.
Geographically speaking, too, when we think about homework help or being a member of a good neighbor team, how close, how far? I know it's important that communities have close proximity to each other. If they're a Karen community or an Afghan community and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we don't like to match teams from Eden Prairie with families in St. Paul. We know that you guys aren't going to get over there like you would want to. So we try to keep them in close proximity. But being that you are out in Eden Prairie, more than likely it will be, if it's a new refugee arrival, the reality is that due to public transportation and housing, more than likely we will be putting families in Minneapolis or South Minneapolis, sometimes Bloomington. We did put one family in Hopkins, but they're having trouble with public transportation, so we really try to keep it more city central. So you might have to drive a little bit further, but that's because you guys are a little bit further out of the city. But yeah, we wouldn't want to match you with someone in Roseville or St. Paul or someone far away that's just, it's just a hike to get out there. Yeah.
So do you always do the coordination with, because I'm just thinking of if there's a communication barrier, then how you coordinate getting to visit that family? And because even if they have a cell phone and they can't speak English, then you can't coordinate that. So how does that work?
Yes, yeah. So it can be kind of challenging sometimes. So during that case management period, part of us asking volunteers to help with appointments is there really convenient, natural ways for volunteers and the family to connect and get to know each other. So during that time, if it's something urgent, the case manager and even the coordinator has the ability to use an interpretation service. So if it's something really urgent that we need to sort out, then we can call an interpreter to do it. There is a fee attached to that, so we try to not do that. So what we will do is if we've matched you with a family, we'll go and introduce you to the family. We'll have you exchange phone numbers and make sure that you have an app where you can translate on your phone. And then typically people text pretty frequently. That's a great way to do it. So we'll text the family and then they can translate it and they can text you back. Sometimes you just end up having to go over and knock on their door because they might not be answering. And you have to just remember that if they text you something that is insensitive, it might just be a complete miscommunication. Like they might text, "I don't want to see you," when really they mean, "I want to see you," because they don't understand all of English yet. So, yeah.
So if we would form a team, you said 4 to 10 people? And then if you were part of that team, so then maybe you would say, like, myself or someone would go, like, maybe twice a month, and someone else would be going all those other times? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, you can do it that way. I would say teams do it a variety of different ways. It sometimes depends on availability. So like if you are only able to go on Thursday nights or something, obviously then your time capacity is a little bit smaller, but if someone is retired and on the team and can go in the daytime more frequently, then we might ask them for more appointment help. So sometimes it depends on how you're available. If you want to do, space it out where you're going once a week and have a schedule, some teams do it like that. Other teams just kind of go when they want to and keep in touch with each other. I have one team that uses a Google form that just says, this is the day I went to visit the family. I helped them with this type of paperwork. I invited them to the zoo. We're going to do that next week. And then it all goes into an Excel document so that the rest of the team can see what's going on, so they can kind of track how often people are going. So that's one way to do it. When teams form, we talk a lot at that first training about how is it going to work best for your team to communicate. Is it going to be email? Are you going to do phone calls with each other, text each other? And then really deciding as a team how you want to do that helps a ton. And then you can sort out some of those scheduling things if certain people do need it to be more scheduled. Yeah.
Could you talk some about money and gifting and those kinds of best practices briefly?
Yeah, so we mostly discourage teams from giving money, at least directly to the family. So if a family is coming and we know that they're going to have a certain expense, like most of our families go to bridging to get furniture and we know what the cost of that is, we will offer that to the team and say, would you like to cover the cost of that? But we don't have you give that money to the family. You would donate it to Arrive, and then we would schedule the appointment. We do that because we don't want to create a weird power dynamic between our volunteers and our clients, our refugee families. We want it to be a mutual relationship, and it's really difficult to have a mutual friendship if one person is giving a lot and the other person doesn't feel like they have anything to give. Like I'm saying at that first training, we go through some scenarios on how to manage situations wisely. I did have a team call me about a month ago, and they said, the family hasn't found a job yet. The church really would like to help pay their rent. He's really been looking for a job. He's had some interviews, but it's just been really hard with the job counselor situation. And so we talked through that, and we decided that they would pay a portion of it. And the family was really responsive in how they received it. They weren't asking or demanding for it. So there are certain situations where the church can step in, but we like to not bring a gift every time. You're not going to pay for things all the time. It is better to help them make choices themselves. So if they want a couch or something, you take them to the Goodwill and you show them what's available, or you go on Marketplace and you show them how much it costs so they have an idea of what that is, and then they can make their own choices. But there are also times where families just don't have the capacity to get the things that they need, and then we would, obviously, as believers, as the church, want to step into those spaces. Like sometimes EBT cards, the food benefit cards, they're supposed to arrive in 2 weeks. Some of them are taking longer than a month. It's because our systems are overloaded. In those situations, yes, we would like you to help feed families, whether that's taking them to the food shelf or dropping groceries off or something people have to eat. And if they don't have a way to buy food, then we've got to figure that out, right? And we do have that grant money where we would give them money for pocket money and groceries, so that's not an expectation. But I'm just saying every situation is different, and there's going to need to be some discernment and some wisdom to figure out, is this going to be helpful? Is this a good way to step in? Or is this going to be harmful? Is it going to create a weird relationship? Is it going to create a dependency that's unhelpful? And sometimes that can be really easy to sort out, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of conversation and prayer. Yeah.
How do you feel? That's an important question.
I think so.
To ask. You've had, and a real thank you for the great presentation, Kelsey, the overview of refugees and the stages, but then also what it looks like tangibly for life, routine, expectations on this Good Neighbor team. Can we see ourselves doing that for a year with 4 to 10 people or 12 or whatever? Mm-hmm. Can I maybe be a coordinator of that team? I don't want to be at St. Andrew. I want to coordinate the effort, but these teams, I want to have them really empowered to really embrace and lead and be what we need to be for these, potentially for these families. Mm-hmm. So I guess that question is, how do we feel for you to be able to say tonight? I have a couple of, like I said, the clipboards back. If you're in, we're kind of in, with this. It's an important commitment to make to these families and to their resettlement and establishment, integration. But you can sign up here, pray about it tonight. Let me know this weekend what you might be thinking, and it'd be a privilege for me to help coordinate here with Kelsey and St. Andrew in this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a privilege to be here. It's always exciting when churches ask that we come out and share. It's a unique volunteer experience. It's not, it's less one and done. It's committing to a year, to building a friendship. But really, it's a beautiful experience, and I think people find that they grow and change. Not unlike if you would go on a missions trip. Often people say, I thought I was going to help someone and I'm coming home changed. I think that happens frequently with our matches between teams and families.
So Kelsey's available for further questions too, I'm sure. Her business cards are here. If anybody online wants to reach out to her with questions, they can do so through me here as well, because I want to make sure that's possible. And at this time, we just have some time to discern as individuals and as families tonight and in the coming few days or in the coming week or so. So thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. Kelsey, thank you for your presentation and for all the good care of people that Arrive Ministries is caring for these days. A blessing for them for sure, but even for us to see these inspiring videos and imagine what it might look like and feel like for us to engage in this relationship building process is incredible. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.